kick things off since it's a few minutes after the hour. Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Liz Landau. I am the president of DCSWA, and we are the DC Science Writers Association. We are a large group of science writing and science journalism, science communication enthusiasts and practitioners here in the Washington, D.C. area. We host amazing events like this, both virtually and in person. Our next event is actually on February 11th. We're going to have a happy hour with the Johns Hopkins Science Writing Program at Astro Beer Hall downtown in DC. So we'd love to see you there. And we also have our Professional Development Day at George Washington University on May 9th, which is our all-day flagship event where we'll have lots of different speakers and panels and networking events for anybody interested in the topic of science writing and science communication. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Martha Heil, who's going to kick things off at this book talk.
Oh, thanks, Liz. Yeah, I'm really excited for this event. We have two great writers with us today. We have Amy Hansen, who is a science writer who specializes in kids publications. And today she's going to show us about Wanda Hears the Stars, which has won an American Library Association award called the Schneider Family Book Award. In addition to that, she has 35 books out, including Bugs and Bugsicles, Insects in the Winter. So if you've ever wondered what happens to insects in the winter, you can find out. Amy has also worked as a journalist for NSF and AAAS and on many newspapers. So she's going to be talking about Wanda Hears the Stars, which is her book about seeing differently. And James is a journalist who covers physics, math, astronomy, chemistry, and earth science. Maybe some more things. We don't know. His articles have appeared in Science News Magazine, Quanta, Scientific American, New Scientist, and the Washington Post, among others. He's currently a senior science writer, and he is the author of Crush, Close Encounters with Gravity, which is a story about seeing gravity, which you may think of as something you know well, differently. So I would just like both the panelists to say hello, and then we'll start with questions.
Hey there. Good. I'm glad everybody could make it. Senior science writer at NASA. You left out the NASA.
Oh, sorry.
Generally, senior science writer.
It's sort of important where you work. Yes.
Yeah. AARP science writer. It's that kind of senior. Hello.
Oh, hello, everybody. Okay, great. Well, so I just want to call attention for the audience, to the fact that we have the covers of all of these books floating in the background of our authors. James, you can see by his right ear, there is Crush. And by Amy's left ear, you can see the Wanda Hears the Stars and the Spanish translation of that book. So well done. So you will put in the chat at some point, when I have a minute while they're talking, different ways you can access these books so that you can buy them if you're interested while we're talking, and I'll pop those in the chat. So let's just start off with the general concept of your book. Let's start with Amy. What's your book about, and how does it display this changed perspective that we're looking for in this session?
So Wanda Diaz-Marcet is a friend of mine, and she started, I met her when she started working at Goddard, at NASA Goddard, and she is just amazing. And she's managing to keep huge mathematical equations in her head as she's using sound that will describe the universe. So I should back up and explain. Sonification is the display of data through sound. That we all know that the satellites don't actually send pictures back to Earth. They're ones and zeros. They're not an actual picture when they get here until you put it together. So there's no reason you can't put it into sound instead of into a picture form. And and so Wanda started using that while she was working at Goddard. And I just found this an amazing story that I thought everybody else should know about.
Okay, great. And then you brought it to us through the medium of pictures. That's great.
Right.
James, could you
Yeah,
tell us? Mhm.
I understand the irony, but that I'm using a picture book for a blind woman. It is in Spanish, which is her first language immediately, but because it has sound described, sound is the terms that picture books have more than any other writing. So you I have to describe the sound, and it became a picture. I write for kids. It became a picture book instead of a mid-grade book or
Neat. All right. So Liz just put in the chat. I'm not sure if all the folks can see it. Let us know in the Q&A if you don't see this. But Liz just put in the chat a documentary from NASA about sonification in which Wanda, the
Mhm.
author, the subject of Amy's book, makes an appearance. So you can check that out at the YouTube link as soon as we can get it to everyone. All right, James, tell us about your book.
Yeah, so my book, Crush, Close Encounters with Gravity, is my attempt to look at gravity from a broader perspective than you usually get in most books about gravity. You can buy books about general relativity and Einstein, or you can read books about gravity in from Newton's point of view. And I wanted to look at gravity as it affects us, from just our
Hmm.
daily experiences out to the structure of the world around us, to the structure of the universe, and discovered along the way in speaking to scientists and reading papers that really gravity is so perennially important to life that I sort of I was inspired, I think, by Powers of 10. There was a documentary that shows zooming out from the very small to the universe. And so this is my attempt to do that with gravity, to zoom out, to start out at the very small where gravity is least significant. It's almost insignificant entirely on the scale of microbes and things. They really don't experience gravity much at all, out to its cosmic significance for the existence and the structure of the universe, and ultimately the end of the universe. So really, gravity plays a role at all of these scales. And I haven't been able to find a book that explains it that way, and so that this book is my attempt to look at gravity, your personal relationship with gravity, from your mere existence to your daily grind, getting out of bed and struggling with gravity to go up and down the stairs.
Well, so that almost answers the next question that I had, which is, how did you get the idea for your book? Was there a moment, James, that made you say, I need to tell people this?
I think there's a book by the physicist George Gamow, which he wrote in the 60s, which deals with the part of gravity that you experience personally, but not general relativity. And I remember it's a very charming book. It has these very amateurish little sketches, and it's a very intimate look at gravity. And I wanted to see how far could you take that. But really, it was reading Gamow's sort of almost silly but introductory image based analysis of gravity that was my inspiration in the first
All
place.
right. And Amy, how did sonification take you by surprise? When you heard about it, or was that the spark of your interest in the book?
Well, my husband works in sonification. So Wanda worked for my husband. So I'd known about this for a long time, and I'd been trying to talk her into doing a book for a long time. And when she moved to Colorado in January of 2020, and so she was on the same continent as I was, which is a big deal because she's lived all over the world, and thought, okay, now we're going to do this. You've gotten your PhD, you did a postdoc, you've traveled the world, and we're going to sit down and do a book. And you had a TED Talk, and all the other awards that she has that are pretty darn amazing. Um, So I got my plane tickets. I was all set to go on March 1st. I got the plane tickets on March 1st, 2020, and then the world shut down, and we ended up talking by Skype for, you know, 6 months or so, that we would meet twice a week to talk for an hour. So in some ways that was better because we could think about the questions we were asking each other and go back and forth. Um yeah, if
And so
she had not
why
been on the
then you and it so I'm going to anticipate the question, why write a book, a little bit for you by saying you probably decided this because you're a children's author, right? To do it in that format. But why Wanda? Why that moment? Why this book?
well, there's no one else doing exactly what she's doing. I know other people using sonification like Robert Alexander, who's out at I think University of California, San Diego, but um he uses sonification and will talk about his work, um but Wanda is just kind of amazing that you have to experience her energy level to understand that it just that she is not someone who's going to be stopped. And other people using sonification are cited, and Robert Alexander is a musician. He's a composer as well as a scientist, and therefore his brain is trained already in this. But that's what you have to do, is train your brain to be listening at the same level that we train our brain to be looking for something. And it just is a very different approach to what how we usually think of looking at space or appreciating space. Um,
So it sounds like you saw this at you there wasn't a moment that you saw this book. It was more a development of over time, how you and the author interacted. Is that right, Amy?
right, as a co, she's my co-author, and saying now, I'd been bugging her for a long time. I knew this was a story. I mean, it just is part of what one knows as a writer, as a journalist, that this is a story, and other people had done it. I mean, you can find lots of videos, but there was not a children's version that explained what she had been going through. It was mostly explaining the science as the outcome as opposed to how she got there, which
Mm-hmm. All right, James. What about you? Why this book? Why write a book? What was your purpose in going into this?
Well, it's a very dynamic time for gravity. Generally speaking, we're learning about dark matter, we're learning about dark energy, and both of those seem to be in trouble now. And those influence gravity. It's There's a lot of new information coming with gravitational waves, so it's a lot has changed since the most recent general popular science book on gravity. And there aren't too many sciences or too many parts of physics that have gone through such a dramatic revolution. And to think something like gravity that we've known for such a long time, we've sort of thrown the doors open. Einstein turned everything on its head, and now we know that he is wrong in some ways, and we have learned that the universe is not behaving the way gravity would tend to, the way you'd expect gravity to make it behave. There's a Nobel Prize for the discovery of the acceleration of the universe just a few years ago. And now the very people, Adam Rees at NASA, who won the prize for that, has his doubts about whether that was even true. So the Nobel laureate is coming out and saying, we know even less about gravity than we did before. And that is one of the themes of the book, is that there was a time where we thought we really understood the universe and most of the stuff in it. And with the discovery of dark matter and dark energy, which are part of gravity, we realized that we only know about 5% of the universe. We know 95% less than we realized we knew or believed we knew 30 years ago. So I think it's really just such a dynamic time that it felt to me like it was a good time to write a book about gravity.
And that actually brings up the next question, which is, it sounds like you had, this is the moment for such a book as you're writing. How did you sell it to the publisher? Did you have that moment in mind that this is the time?
Yeah, I went to them and said, what is the most mysterious force that we know of? And oddly enough, it's also the oldest force that we know of, and we know less about it now than we did 5, 10, 15 years ago. And I think that was intriguing to them.
Amy, how about you? How did you sell your book to the publisher? What were the concerns? For many people here in the audience, they may want to know, I'm thinking about selling a book to a publisher. How can I do that? What did
Well, it
you think,
helped.
Amy?
I did have an agent at that moment. My agent got sick during the pandemic and therefore left. So I don't have an agent now because but but the reason this book is sold so well, and actually it went to auction. I get to check that off my bucket list of, had two different houses bidding against it. So, wow. Yeah, it's two and it's still not very much money, but it's okay. It's,
One of the pains of writing. Yes, it's
but
very fulfilling. Sorry.
it is very fulfilling. And the it highlights a woman in science, a woman using science differently, a woman who is from Puerto Rico, who is not white, who is had to overcome many things. And it's her journey that is very emotional, that uh, the pictures do the heavy lifting um in the emotions. So here is the image where she realizes that she is losing her eyesight. And Rocio did such a spectacular job of keeping the stars in mind here as she is, you know, it's not modeling, but it's an important piece of it. And then, we have the pictures of her actually listening to a sound from the universe. This was the um Radio Jove transmissions. So they were listening to the sun um where when it had a big explosion, and she realized that, oh, she could still go on. And that, those are the emotions sell picture books, which or I say that blanketly, but actually, Bugsicles doesn't have that many emotions, but it's a but but it does make a huge difference in how much kids are going to want to pick it up, because they may not understand the science, but they do understand being frustrated about something they had planned to do and not being able to do it.
So it sounds like Amy, your book really demonstrates a new way to see it, and this idea of shifting perspective is an important one in science because a lot, Thomas Kuhn had this idea in the structure of scientific revolutions that science moves by paradigm shifts, so that, you work within a paradigm, complete it out, and then you find it doesn't fit, and then you have to readjust. And I, Amy, how did the sonification in your book, how did that provide a new perspective? Like, did as far as the science goes, like how did people how did the science change when sonification was added as a new way to see,
A new way to think about
to
it
think
anyway.
about it? Yeah, sorry.
The it opens the door for more people to be doing the same work. And when you have more people with different perspectives, um, you're likely to find new and different things. So Wanda was able to listen and hear. I think the one I highlighted in the book, I mean, she was part of a team, so saying she discovered isn't quite accurate. And I don't say she discovered, but she heard the sound of by being able to slow down the sounds, she was able to understand the connection between the supernova explosion and the beginning of the next star, because the vibration keeps going a long time, and it sets off new stars. You have energy moving out, it doesn't get lost in the universe. It vibrates against other things, and in that case, a new star. So it's a matter of listening carefully. The other person I mentioned, Robert Alexander, was listening to a recording of the sun, and he heard, I think it was an A, as he was just listening to the sonification of the thing, explosion on the sun, and A was assigned to carbon or oxygen. Actually, I'm not sure. Must have been oxygen, because it was something they were not expecting to find coming off the sun. And it wasn't very much, but because he was trained to listen for it, he found it, and then he could go back into the paperwork and see that yes, it was there. It was just buried because there was so much data coming in, and so it gives you it lets you find more and different.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, I think that's the key is that, once you have turned that revolution and opened it, then you start to fill with a whole lot of new science ideas. James, how about you? How does this paradigm shift idea operate in your book?
Well, there are a few paradigm shifts. I did want to mention you were asking about how to interest publishers in books, and Amy had an agent, which is nice. I didn't have an agent, but the way I've gotten them to be interested in my books is covering things for science outlets. So it allows you to both distill the ideas that are going to go into a book, as well as giving an example to publishers. So to me, if I want to write a new book, I start writing articles about the subject of that book. I started writing articles about gravity, and then use those to sell the book to the publisher. So to me, it earns you money, it gains you credibility, and it helps the publisher to understand why they should be paying you to write a book, as little as they do pay. But as far as the paradigm shifts, really gravity is all about paradigm shifts. Isaac Newton started out by describing gravity, and the last thing he says at the end of the Principia, the book where he went through the mechanics of gravity, is he didn't have any idea what it was. So he discovered what it did, but he explicitly says he doesn't know why it does what it does. And people came to terms with that over a few hundred years. We just sort of started accepting it, and people weren't concerned about it anymore. It was a whole paradigm shift. People got used to this, not quite understanding what caused gravity. And then Einstein came along and said, nope, Newton had it completely wrong, that there was no attraction between things. It's the curvature of space and time. And so there was a whole nother paradigm shift. And of course, his greatest blunder in his mind was predicting that there was a cosmological constant which worked against gravity, because he wanted the stars to be stationary. And he later just decided that was his biggest error. But now that's what won the Nobel Prize, I think, in 2011, when they discovered that the universe is actually accelerating. So his cosmological constant didn't hold the stars in place in space, but was pushing them apart even faster. So really, to me, the whole story of gravity is paradigm shift after paradigm shift after paradigm shift. And now we know there's this huge, they call it the Hubble tension. We're on the verge of another paradigm shift, because there's this disagreement on what's going on with the Hubble constant, which is the expansion of the universe. So I try to tell as much about that as I can in the book, but mostly the answer to that is we need another book about gravity in the next 5 to 10 years, because we're going to find out how this Hubble tension is resolved. And so I'd like to think that every chapter in the book is inspired by yet another paradigm shift, another reversing or completely upsetting of the apple cart, appropriate for Isaac Newton, I guess, when it comes to gravity.
So you've set up your own sequel.
Well, I like to think that the scientists at NASA are setting up the sequel. But yeah, I'm going to pitch some stories about that, and I might have to revise, or at least write an appendix to add to the next version.
Well, that sounds, yeah, that sounds fantastic. With all of this, you know, advanced stuff in your books, especially yours, James, it's just chock full of scientific concepts. What was the hardest one to get across?
I think the hardest one is explaining how Einstein changed the way we perceive gravity. And I don't think it's hard because the idea is fundamentally hard. I think that it's hard because we spend so much time learning one paradigm that you, as a student in physics or just generally in science, you go through a paradigm shift that doesn't kick in until you go to college and they start teaching you about relativity. They basically say, sure, Newton was right-ish, but fundamentally he was wrong. And so you can redo all of gravity by switching to Einstein. It's kind of brutal to have to do that. And so uh, writing the chapters about Einstein's perception of gravity and getting across that it's both correct and it's not as hard as it sounds. It's just unfamiliar, I think, was the hardest part. I'm not even sure that I did a good job of it. I would like to refine
Yeah,
that chapter forever and ever.
I just realized that I may be asking that question. Yes. Amy, what about you? What was the hardest idea to get across in your book? Was it a science fact or something more soft?
I don't think it was a science. It was making sure she and her family appeared as real people and having the arguments of using Spanish in an English picture book, which isn't that unusual. If the picture book is if it's a slightly older book, if it's a middle grade book, then you do the code switching of sprinkling the words in and then letting everybody know what they mean by inference. But for a read aloud, I had to fight to get the Spanish the translations in English right away because I was picturing myself as a tired parent reading this at bedtime, and I can read Spanish, but I can't pronounce it very well, which is a problem, I should be remedying, but there it is. And so I wanted the English translations right after the Spanish terms, and yet her father could not, we couldn't have her father speaking English because he just didn't do that. That was not something
Mhm.
he ever did. So, um, yeah, it was balancing those pieces of they're real people and they used lots of, real things.
Hmm. Hmm. And what was the most surprising thing about and then let's talk about the reader reaction. What I want to know about surprising is what was the most surprising thing about your reader's reaction when you think about how it was received either by critics or people who just stopped you and said, "Hey, I read your book." So what was yours, Amy? What surprised you?
Well, this was kind of fun because I thought I wrote a book about a woman who figured out how to do science when the deck seemed stacked against her, and she kept going and found a way to do the science, and then she did it, and it's glorious. But as I read it, had one friend read it, and she told me that she'd never look at the stars the same way again. And I thought, wow, and another person told me it was a book about teachers and mentors. And somebody else told me that the pinnacle of the book was when Wanda became an independent adult again. The science is almost secondary to she figured out how to use the tools to make her life work, and science was then a job. And it wasn't it so the different places that people see a peak is really interesting to me, and yeah, I love sending my books out into the wild. They can, and hearing back from them as they go. Yes.
Yeah, it is always nice to hear. I mean, I think readers are sometimes a little bit diffident about approaching authors because they don't want
Hmm.
to look like big old fanboys or whatever. But I think it's the nicest compliment a reader can give to an author is to ask a question about your book and really, engage with it in some way. So, James, what would you say was surprising to hear from your readers?
Certainly the reviews that I read online and things. One of the most gratifying things is when they tell me, or when they say in the review, not me specifically, that they like the humor, because I think that a lot of the things that I said I wrote because they sort of tickled me, and I liked the way it sounded, but I wasn't sure anybody else would think it was funny. And so the reviews, even the formal reviews in Science and other places, have said that it's irreverent, not irrelevant, and amusing and engaging, and those are the things that I strive for. But it's never really clear whether you achieve it. Not There aren't many opportunities when I write articles for magazines to know whether people got the humor and got the sort of lightheartedness that I try to put into some stories. But in this case, the reviewers seem to enjoy it from an entertainment side, which I had hoped for, but wasn't sure I'd achieved.
That's great. We have one question in the chat for you, James. Actually, I see one for Amy and one for James, but we'll take those after we finish our last question, which is what's next for you? So we'll start with James since he was last speaking. James, what's next for you in terms of books and writing projects?
Narrowing down which one I want to work on next. So they're the ones that the publishers like and the ones that I'm enamored with. I like history. I like stories. One of my favorite popular science books of all time is Longitude by Davis Sobel. And so my goal in life is to write a book almost as good as her book Longitude. I think I may never achieve that. And that might be the last book I ever write, because it's one of those things that sort of I tinker with and then I put it away because it's not as good as Davis Sobel. I'll never be as good as her, but that's my goal in life. In the meantime, the publishers want more pragmatic things, so I'm balancing things that resonate with the news, with climate change and things like that, versus my little ancient tale of physics along the lines of Davis Sobel.
And James, we should look at your website, jriordon.com, for future releases, right?
Absolutely. Although releases in this business come out every 2 years or so. So don't hold your breath.
All right, Amy, how about you? What's next for you?
I have a manuscript called Under My Feet, which is under my feet in a forest, under my feet in a swamp. So it goes through different biomes of what's going on in the first meter below ground. So far, I haven't managed to sell that to any publisher. We'll keep working on that, and everything else it's in flux enough that I'm not sure. But and frankly, when I get unsure about manuscripts for kids, I write plays. So the last couple weeks I've been working on plays because
That's another thing you have in common with James. He's
I
also a
did not know
playwright.
that. We'll have to talk
Yeah.
about that sometime.
Yeah. I see it. Is there a science play in the offing? Could we make that happen? All right. This is great. All right. Well, so I've got a couple questions in the chat, and this is from Hypatia of SWA. So SWA, if I get this wrong, please feel free to chime in the chat with what you actually meant, but I'll read what you've got here. Do you think that actually the phrase energy curve space actually makes sense as an interpretation of GRT, or is it not more that energy and curvature should be unified in a similar way as energy and matter? More directly, do you think that there's a causal direction in the Einstein equation? And if so, which side would be independent and which the function of the other?
So I have to say, Hypatia sounds like they know a lot about GRT, which is general relativity. I assume GRT. In any case, I mentioned this in the book, that there is this phrase that is common in general relativity, which is matter tells space how to curve, and space tells matter how to move. And of course, matter and energy, as Hypatia points out, are really two sides of the same coin. So matter and energy tell space how to curve, and space tells matter and energy how to move. And people think of that as being a very poetic sort of yin and yang description of the universe. And really what Wheeler, who was the author of this very important textbook, meant by it was it's ridiculously hard. He called it the Gordian knot. And if you're familiar with the Gordian knot, it's a knot that was so tight and so difficult to disentangle that supposedly whoever untied this knot would become the ruler of all of Asia. And I can't remember his name, the conqueror, the Roman conqueror, decided to just cut it with a sword instead of disentangling it. But the point was he referred to this as a Gordian knot, not because it was a poetic yin and yang, but because exactly what Hypatia is mentioning. It's just so complicated. They are so intertwined. You can't say that one causes the other. They are one difficult, mathematically ridiculously challenging thing. That the mathematics for general relativity, as it's described in Wheeler's book, is four-dimensional, and humans don't understand four dimensions, and yet you have to describe things in this really, really hard way. And I think that's the toughest thing about general relativity is the mathematics.
So if SWA were to read more, where could they look in your book for more about this particular topic?
Yeah, I try to make it a little easier. There's another interpretation of general relativity called the river model or the flowing space model, which takes Einstein's four-dimensional equations, which most people use, and turns it into a three-dimensional thing. So at least the math is more tractable and it's more intuitive. It's not at all a common thing in general relativity for people to do that, but it gives you a way to understand general relativity that is much closer to our intuition. Don't expect to see it in too many scientific papers, but it's very it's explanatory and intuitive and an easy way to think about general relativity. But it's really one of the hardest fields of physics that there is.
Great. Well, thanks, Hypatia of SWA, for that question. And for the next question coming up to Amy, which is, how do you deal with drawing pictures about blind experiences? Is making sound visible as difficult as making pictures sound like something? And our little also wanted to ask how things like fun or fear or sparkle get translated between the, I guess he says the sides, but I assume means the languages.
How do I make pictures
How do you deal with
representing?
drawing pictures about blind experiences?
I have to work with Wanda about what this is an experience I don't have. I mean, I can close my eyes and pretend I do, but um, in reality, I don't. And I'm also in reality not the one drawing the pictures. We want to start with that, I'm not the artist. I did have approval of the artwork because as I write nonfiction, I want to make sure it's accurate, and the publisher does too. We all do. So Wanda doesn't have a large amount of visual memory, she tells me. So there's a picture here where she's seeing the stars for the first time. And she still remembers seeing the stars now, but she remembers almost nothing else visually, which is a really interesting concept. And so the pictures were approved by her sister and by her mother when the Spanish version was available before we went to press, so that we weren't getting something wrong. And we did have to change a couple things because we did. Like she was supposed to be getting a injection of insulin, and I had her mother giving her the injection, but in reality, she gave herself the injection. Those aren't big changes, but they're important to get right because it is the way it is, and you don't mess with it. So yeah, I don't know if the reader will feel like they have seen the blind experience. I mean, they have seen somebody who is blind, but will they imagine what it feels like? I don't know. But you can write. You can tell me when you're done reading it. Was there a second part of the question that I didn't answer?
No, but I did want to let you know that a couple people said congrats to Amy on the Schneider Award, And also, representation is so important. Thank you, Amy, for your book. My school is over 60% Hispanic, and having these stories of real people overcoming barriers and doing great things is so important.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's a great. And then here's another. This will be the last question that I take, and we'll close the session after this. But I just wanted to bring in this last question. James, there's a lot of personal anecdotes woven in your book, from your father's early years at NASA to the Salem witches to skiing with your son and experiments with Mary May and Nicole. What inspired you to tell the story of gravity that way?
I think because gravity is something that we all experience. There's a lot in science that you can't personally experience. There are people that have a very good intuitive feel for the nuclear force or plasma fusion or something like that. We don't have the sort of connection that Wanda has through sound. But for gravity, you do. It's there perennially. You've felt it your entire life. A lot of people in the end are going to fall down and die because of gravity, and so it's the type of thing that I really wanted to emphasize, that it's not a dry mathematical thing. It's something that we all experience and interpret differently in our own way.
That's
So,
great.
James, you didn't manage to tell me that you were pulled to do this book. Come on.
The puns, the amazing puns.
Right.
People tell me that it's odd that it's about gravity because they can't put it down, or
Yeah.
a lot of pun
Nice, nice. Okay, one more question from Liz. Do Amy and James have advice for aspiring book writers out there? What is one thing that really helped you when you were stuck? Amy, could you take that?
Mm. Writing different, moving on to a different project for a little while. That I could having multiple things. None of my books are very long, so it's often a matter of rewriting to get them short. It's not that short is easy, it's that you have to rewrite it 16 million times. And when you're at 15 million, you write something else for a while and come back to it. And um, but it's
Okay.
yeah.
That's a good way to get unstuck. Yeah, to go and do something else. I mean, I personally go and pick something that I hate, like cleaning the toilet or whatever, and then,
Right, right.
I'd much rather
Procrastination
sit there.
tools are amazing. It's yeah. Um,
All right, Amy, James, what do you think? What
Yeah.
are some advice for aspiring book writers?
Well, I will say, as far as finding these other things to inspire, I mean, I get a lot of writing done during tax season, so
mhm.
I'm doing my tax. But I think that the main thing for me is to say that you need to pick something that you are passionate about, that you'll enjoy, because you're gonna hate it after about 8 months. So if you start with something that you really really love, that hate hopefully won't be as intense as something that you just are mildly passionate about. This is at least at the level that I write, the payoff financially speaking is kind of small. So if you're not completely enamored with the subject when you start, and you go through those doldrums in the middle that we all go through, if you're not doing something you enjoy, it's just going to end up on a shelf and you're not going to finish it. At least for me.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
drink lots of coffee, and for me, eat lots of gummy bears.
All right, great. So I did get a chance to put in the chat both the books, Wanda Hears the Stars and Crush and Close Encounters with Gravity. And so please purchase them there, or contact the authors at their websites. So I see Liz is back, and it's about the end of the session. I think we got all the questions from the chat. So thanks so much to everybody for coming today. And thanks to DCSWA for having the event. And thanks to James and Amy for being great authors and having such a fun interview. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
this
you.
has been really amazing. Thank you, Martha, for facilitating this and bringing these fantastic authors to us. It really struck me, like listening to the two of you talk, that, the universe as a whole is so abstract that, we are all like grasping for these
Mhm.
ways to understand it. And, I think Wanda's story is so inspiring. I mean, she has overcome so many obstacles and she lost her sight. She's able to continue doing science in this way. But, in a way, we are all limited in our ways of sensing the universe, and we all have to rely on these sort of metaphors and analogies that, James is so skilled at as well about making this accessible to us, these extremely abstract concepts of gravity, of general relativity. We are all in some sense blind to the real universe out there, and we're all
Mhm.
trying to understand how we can how we can grasp the universe in some way that makes sense to us. And so I love that both of you have done such a great job of exploring that topic in very, very different ways. And obviously targeting different audiences as well. So yeah, I think this has been such a great session. I see that we have some folks in the chat who are already buying your books. So
Oh,
that's great to see
and
as
mine is
well.
available in libraries. So if you feel tight on money, go get it out of the library. But I want you to buy it, but I'd rather have
But
you
you
read
want
it.
them to read it more.
Right, right.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, so I'm just gonna put in the chat. So if anybody is not a member of DuckSWA, please go to duckswa.org. We have our listing of events. Again, we have a happy hour on February 11th at Astro Beer Hall downtown. Any other closing thoughts from our authors?
No, thank you so much for inviting us
Yes,
to do this. It was a
very
lot of
much
fun.
appreciate it. And did you give my website out?
I did. I did.
Okay, okay.
It's
Thank you.
amyhansen.com, right?
Amy S. Hansen.
Amy S. Hansen. All right. It's in the chat. I just copied and pasted whatever you had sent to me.
Okay,
So
okay.
should be good.
I
Yep.
didn't read the chat. Yeah.
Nope. I just checked it. It's fine. All right. Great. Well, thanks everyone for coming, and hope we all have a good spring as we move forward into spring and renewing ourselves, right? This is the time of renewal. So
Oh, this
have
is a time of sleeping in because it's so snowy. Yeah.
well, whether you sleep or act, have a great month, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
All right, thanks so much. Take
But
care.
Bye.